It's always lovely to be able to walk through a group of people about my artwork because it's something that it gives people an insight, but it also every time I have a talk, it always gives me more of an insight into what I'm doing as well, because it's always evolving as an artist, and the research you're doing and the people you're talking to, the practice you have. So it's going to be at stages a bit of a sprint, because I was sort of trying to give you I suppose, an insight into how my artwork evolved and how I use, I suppose, the mechanical devices within my artwork. So, as Jennifer mentioned, I'm a sort of a time-based kinetic artist. My mum's was born in Derby, which is it's a couple of hours up from Broome, and her mother and her was from the Broome area, and we've still got a lot of relatives up that way that we go and visit. And it's driving from Perth to, which you can see Perth down the bottom and Broome up the top. Driving from there in school holidays was a great journey, because it was sort of seeing it. Well, it was seeing the country and seeing the country evolve from something that was really green and lush to a certain degree to the country that's up the top, which is a lot redder and drier. It's a very unique place around Broome. There's a lot of iron there, so that's the red soil comes from that iron content. And Yaru is, if I can step out for a second, the Yaru language group is fairly small, and as you can see, there's I think they worked out around 256 language groups, within Australia, and there's certain similarities across the groups. But the unique thing is that language evolved from that place over tens of thousands of years. So when you mention a word, it invokes, it's sort of more than just a cerebral sort of response in comparison to English, but it's something that's really a visceral thing for the people, the speakers of it. And it's a connected language. It's one that hasn't been disrupted in any way. And that's the country. I mean, it looks a little bit washed out here, but when you first arrive into Broome, it's really intense. It's the colour shift, and the green and the red and the blue of the ocean is really amazing. And this is sort of a drone shot. I was actually writing with water on country. You can see Nuggala along the side, which means salt water. But it's a country that you can see these timelines in. You can see, I mean, this is a tidal flat to the left-hand side there. So you can see these tidal marks up and down the mangroves and sort of the road going along next to it. It's one of those areas that everywhere you go, you see these moments of time. It's a long time and short time along the area there. So I suppose a lot of that country and the language has sort of, I suppose, is deeply embedded within my artwork. I'm sort of exploring the language of the country. I don't understand the depth within the language. There's so much knowledge within each word, and there's so much knowledge within all the Indigenous languages that I think is overlooked. Language about country, and that's predominantly the language is about the people, the culture, and the country. So I sort of, with that, I use a lot of natural materials, sort of these charcoal branches and rocks, and sort of soils and ochres and oxides within that. And it's sort of this combination of using these mechanical devices and that interaction between the mechanical device and the raw materials and how they react. It becomes, for me, an unpredictable moment for these reactions. It's not something that you can say that is going to run down that certain way, or this is going to react, and over time with this building up for these layers, or the sort of scraping back of these layers with water, that you can actually predict it. So for me, it's that sort of choreographing the elements and then letting them play through over that time within the gallery, which could be 1 week or 4 months. So these are works that sort of, I'm using a lot of iron oxide here, and these are works at Josh Milani's gallery. I had a solo exhibition a couple of years ago, and it's a lot of the elements. And the mechanics of the work are very slow moving. It's something that you'll come into it, and it's sometimes not perceivable because it's the ideas of looking at time, I suppose, and this trying to perceive that distance of long time. For me, is something I try to explore within the work and bring people into. So. This is similar to the work that's in the Aichi Triennial, where it's a solid block that the string pulls through. But I'll sort of touch a little bit more onto it. But it's the speed of these mechanics is very important with this idea of time. So this is work done at the Sydney Biennale, and this happened over, I think, 3 months. And it was the Yaru words that slowly appeared, and they didn't really appear, it eroded. Water was used to erode it in the outside. So it started off similar to that, like a white wall. It was layers and layers of iron oxide that were built up onto the wall. And then over that, then there goes a white chalk-like substance, and they're all sprayed with water, so super fragile surface. If you touch it with your finger, it basically collapses in bits. So the water, once it touches it, it's just sort of, it gives it a certain energy that sort of almost explodes from that just slight inclusion of water. This is a sort of close up of that detail of it. So these runs and bleeds, it becomes a part of that. It in a way where this idea of scraping back to show histories underneath, to show the words of the country that I sort of want to. I suppose part of the work is that revealing of histories that were forgotten or denied, and for me and for many Indigenous people, this heritage or their culture has been sort of written under the colonisers' history to a great degree. So for me, it's that idea of not replacing one with the other, but sort of scraping back and to reveal or to bring forth that was underneath. It's a wonderful textural thing. This is the same sort of mechanic in Yokohama. This is a time lapse, which I'll give you a little idea of it. So this is how it builds up. It's not necessarily etching around a word. It's sort of erasing in many different ways, and it's actually erasing words to make this pattern. So all those are little parts of words that were, for this particular one, from A. O'Neill, who was the Chief Protector of Aborigines at the time when my grandmother was a child. So they're letters from him that I'm erasing off the surface to reveal the word of her language group. And sadly, because this was 2020, this was the beginning of COVID, so I wasn't able to come to the event and install this. So it was one of those things that's a bit difficult. It was letting go of one of my babies who I've never had anyone else install before but myself, and they did a wonderful job. I've got the actual time lapse of them installing it as well, and it was, I think, installed better than I could have done. So it's a lesson for me that I can do that. So it takes a good while to. I mean, you can start to see the word come through, but it's slowly developing, and even developing the sort of the textures and layers within it, because you've got bleeds that go over other bleeds, and the texture actually comes off the surface. But it's also this, and this is part of the serendipitous nature of sort of these artworks, is the first time I didn't realise that what happened down on the ground surface became another landscape that it was building up. So there's just developing new landscapes from this I suppose, exposure, or this erasing and redefining in a way. So that's the sort of how it ended up. So there's other works of erosion is a great part of my work. I think it's that idea of sort of taking back. I think it's a sort of a very cathartic process. For me, is just to finding out these histories. This is a book of A.O. Neville, who's the Chief Protector of Aborigines. This is almost a book to justify why he was part of, in Australia, what was called the stolen generation, when they took children from parents, Aboriginal parents, and basically gave them away to other parents. So they lost that connection with family, and there was a lot all over sort of Australia, but a lot that were taken away from their parents, and something that still hasn't really been resolved there. But it's something that continues. My grandmother, there's a letter that I've got that it was suggested by A.O. Neville, and I've got the letter, or a copy of the letter, that she goes and lives at the convent, which I think she did from a certain age to live in the convent, which was still close to her mother, but it was still taken away from her. So the water drips over this over a long period of time and erodes back through it, sort of erasing his words and creating again. It's hopefully to give you insight into the past, I suppose show you what's happening now, but also sort of project a bit in the future and build a new landscape. It's not about just sort of this tearing down. It's about that sort of idea of slowly building and replacing, and something that really doesn't resemble what it started off as. And this is, I think, the dichotomy between the cultures. It's something that there's a lot of difference there that needs to be brought forward and seen and appreciated. So water's a wonderful thing to erode back things. It's so evocative, but it's so unpredictable in its nature. It almost creates these little sort of little ecologies and microbiomes of itself. But it's these rocks, and it was these rocks that it's sitting on. All the materials I used for this particular exhibition were collected from that country that I was on. So this is Perth, so I went out with an elder to collect all these materials. And at the end of the exhibition, all these materials went back to the place where we picked them up, and have sort of given permission to use words and materials, which is a very important part of the artwork, because it's again not wanting to come in and take, and me sort of digging up the country for that, but it's almost to try to give back by creating these works, and then the materials go back. So this is the same part of the exhibition, and I've got to keep an eye on time, because it might become a little bit of an animation near the end when I flick through the slides really quickly, but it sort of helps to see where I'm at the Aichi, so I'll hopefully get the information. So this is a mechanical plotter, in a way. So again, I like using the technology. I make all the work, the mechanisms myself, and design and machine them, and try to simplify it so it's not about that machine. It's about that interaction that happens on the wall. So the plotter actually plots out Yaru words that are in, I suppose, a Latin form or English text form, this hard sort of shell container that contains a word that has far more meaning than what the translation could ever do. And so it traces around these without sort of showing anything on the plotter there. And with that, there's 25 strings off each side of it. And that just goes through that tracing of each word. And with that, and again, it's a very slow-moving work. It looks actually faster than it should be, but I'm probably used to the work I was looking at there. But with that, it moves 2 strings per piece of charcoal. It's like an X and Y axis for the charcoal. And it's not about sort of I suppose, trying to make a language that's understandable by the audience, but reimagine it for me and resituate that language as a sort of a moving language, a constantly evolving language. And like the culture was never fixed off, or as I was taught in school, it was like Indigenous people are basically, they're going to go extinct within a certain period of time, and their culture is static. So this is it ends up to be a moving landscape, whereas it sort of marks the wall over time, and it builds up and it creates these wonderful textures as the charcoal wears back through. And by the end of the exhibition, it's got the really dark ones, but it's also starts to rub off. This is another exhibition using the same thing. So you can see all the strings going across the top there. So there's, in those strings as well, there's this movement like it's alive as the strings slightly move as the charcoal moves on the wall. And little bits fall off on the ground, which again is this idea of it is creating this new landscape. It's quite terrifying. This one here was a large bit, and I was at the exhibition opening where it fell down in front of me. So it was those moments which I really like. I think it worries the invigilators or the people caring for the work sometimes, because it's a fairly violent act. Again, this is Milani's artwork. So this string work has sort of had every place I sort of install in it becomes a response to the place. It's never the same sort of mechanism. Probably because I'm looking on the side, it looks a little bit squished. So it's just these strings go off into this one, and it goes off into a corner. And I sort of get great delight out of trying to align these strings perfectly. And the string takes great delight out of sort of circumventing my desire for this perfection. I've worked out that string has its own nature and mind, and I need to respect that. This is a wonderful space in the gallery where you just sort of come around to the corner. So these were moving slowly up and down the wall, marking it, and sort of had pearl shell and rock and charcoal. So using pearl shell from Broome, which was at the time, and still with this sort of multicultural nature of Broome, there was a lot of Japanese pearling divers, but also technicians of how that was done. So a lot of knowledge came from the Japanese into the pearling industry there. So that's sort of getting close to the exhibition, where you can see that on the ground. And it's one of those things again that sometimes gallerists, not gallerists, but the bigger institutions sort of freak out a bit with people walking on charcoal. But again, it's just people come in and they're looking at the work, and they walk on a bit of charcoal, and it's sort of that sense they look down, and sort of there's this connection back to the place where they're standing, in a sense, by that observation. So this is similar work in Aichi was this work where it's pulling, and I'll go over it a bit more when we get there, but it sort of pulls string out of this tower, and the tower slowly collapses like there, and the string's wound around really tightly in very small layers, so it's slowly peeling it away and collapsing to reveal the centre core of it, and then the colour of the string is then brought up onto that. So it creates this again, it's this sort of idea of this landscape that's constantly evolving through this imagery. And this is the final of the other work. This was done in Mona down in Tasmania. And this is it's sort of a block of compressed soil with an outer crust that's done within the same process, and it's water slowly eroding away, creating a text work. But this was a serendipitous moment because we had the lighting on the top. It was all about the text on the top. And this is using the local language down there, and I had permission to use the language. And we collected ochres, went out with two Indigenous elders to collect the ochres that went into this. And this is where all the colours of the ochres are bleeding out over the surface. But the lighting on it originally was on the top, and no one saw the front until one of the attendants there sort of put their light up to see whether there's anything growing on there. And realised there was all these colours on it. So that was sort of at the end of the exhibition. So in this one, I'll just have a glass of water. We went to the Cassin clay factory, which we were discussing before. It was warm, and I think our induction for the first week was set us up for the rest of it. I think we adjusted well for the first week, really, because the second week was cooler. We felt like we had climatised, but we hadn't really. It was just that it was actually a bit cooler. So we walked around these areas collecting some of the material. So every bit of the material that I used for the soil came from the area, which I think within that practice and with the other one, it was sort of, I think, seeing an area where these clays are going back into the culture. They're going back into making things that you eat off and you drink out of, that are part of certain ceremony and practice. That this is, and the sort of, I'm even within here, this is Zakato-san, and he was the boss of it. He showed us around and he was great. He showed us every bit of detail of the processes of it and even the sort of what we would call byproducts, I suppose, in some industries, and throw them away. They went into other industries to make. I mean, the coarsest clay they've got goes into making the tiles, the house tiles on the roof, which is amazing to see all around the area. And Seto is a wonderful place just to explore, and you can see the history within the place, within the textures of the place. So this is this yellow, and this stratification of the area is amazing. Just seeing this old time, these levels of sedimentary build-up in the area. They're sort of going for the really white, the sort of fine, sort of white clays. This is something they didn't know what to do with because it was yellow. So we went and got some, and it was like, how much do you want? And this is a huge, huge mound, and so you can imagine them thinking we're after truckloads, and it was like, oh, can we have like 2 bags of it, or around 100 kilos? So we took very little of it, but used it a lot within this. So this is just one quarry across. So everything was from the Cassin clay factory, and the yellow was from here. Really wonderful stuff. It's just so tactile, sort of going out there to be able to play with these materials, because that's a great part of it, is that sort of holding onto the materials and feeling. We did a lot of experimentation, I think, on the first Saturday. Michelle and I sat up on a hill. We got a lovely view, got our wheelbarrows and water, and had to play with mixers because it's very important with this process. So this is the factory. This is a working factory here. So this is this is work one. This is a work that roads. It was similar to the one I showed previously. Roads with water. And it was in the factory area of it. So there was actually, to the left there's the working clay presses. So the sound that you hear is the machinery, and then the dripping water of this clay being compressed. And it's such a wonderful slow cycle, and very manual. It's got these big cogs on it, which has worked so well with machinery. You can see up above there's the mechanics that actually drips the water on this over time. And this is the first day, I think, the footage we took the first day. So it just, the opportunity who gave us, well, we went on, I think it took us 2 days to find this one. The first spot was stairs, and very rudimentary stairs to get to this spot, and then second day we found these two spaces. So sort of chose these spaces together, but it just talks so well about this process of country from them, with this raw material and the project that I'm doing here with sort of revealing and using those same materials within this process to give you. And this is my sister Michelle, who's sitting here, who kindly came and helped out with this and experienced the same things, and probably more because Shell was moving a lot more soil than I was, and basically took charge of that compression soil. So this is basically formwork that we build up a layer at a time of formwork, compressing the soil, doing it in 17 mil layers, and then building it up to, I think it was 750, 800 mil high. And then on a very quiet time, then taking it off and hoping the whole thing doesn't collapse onto the ground. Because it's only soil holding it up. It's rammed earth, so it should hold itself up. But this is the start of it, and it's just I think it was the first day we started it and sitting there. It's always a magic moment to see the artwork start, because it's sort of that you've got this perfect rectilinear block that almost has a sort of a building sort of a feel or of a concrete nature to it, and seeing those first drips of water that go onto it. So this is a text work. This is using the word buru, and buru is it's a huge word. It's a word that is the first time I heard the interpretation, it was land, country, soil, the plants, animals, time and space. And now I think they've changed it to everything that you see in time and space. I talk about this a lot. I don't ever feel I'm going to understand that word. It's something that has evolved for so long in that place that for me it would be a long time going through 10s, 20 seasons to start to get a glimpse of what that actually means. So the English interpretation is really hard to resolve. So this is why I like to do these works, to try to experiment, also not experiment, but try to see ways of seeing those words in something that's not a didactic of English. So this is you can see it in the background, the clay being pressed in all those little areas of dripping water. And then this wall at the back was just like, do you want to cover the wall? And it was just like, no, this is perfect. Having this block and this nice neat area and this wall where the water actually drips down as you're sitting on that plinth there is part of the process of the water dripping back through there. It was a really amazing place. It was a great experience to be able to sort of do this within the space, and we had so much support from the people around. But to be able to take those materials and build, and then those materials go back on the site again, and it's something I won't see. I won't see the edges of it, but I won't see the end of it. And that was top shed. So that was week 2, 3. And top shed was hotter. It was bigger, but it was hotter. It felt hotter. We had lots of fans, so it was, it felt, I think it was like 39 degrees one day, but it felt like 38.5 or something with a fan. So it was cooler. So this is the lower shed. So you sort of walk up there to the top shed, and for all those people who came and visited, it's a bit of a slog to get there, and we walk there every day. It's uphill. Luckily, it's downhill at the end of the day. You just follow your feet, and it takes you to the hotel. But this was the area when, so it was only a small shed. And they sort of built the door and everything. They got these old doors to put on it, which is really wonderful. But this one is the string work. So it's those sort of each layer having sort of ringlets of string around the edge of it. And as it slowly pulls through, it's just removing that soil and collapsing around it. And when we built it up with layers, different layers of soil that we've collected. I think we went to 6 or 7 different sites to collect it. Again, this is sort of the reveal of it. This is a day we only have 3 people there, and it's a very zen day. There's no talking because it's if you touch a corner, it falls off. So it's the process is becomes very exact with it. So you can see that it goes up over a pulley, and then there's a central pulley that pulls it down, and it goes through. You see rocks either side of it, and it's working with natural material.
Near the seat there, there's just a little light. The one in here.
Sorry. It's editing on the train yesterday as I was coming in from Nagoya. I didn't hear any of that, so if there's any, I don't know, there shouldn't be anything inappropriate there. But working with that, and it's this one in particular, because using string and soil, the way things move through these mechanisms, I have to have rocks to balance it on each side, to balance the tension coming in and the tension going out. So it's always having to adjust to the materials I'm using, and using the materials itself to balance it out is such a... It always has to be that way. I don't know, it's by accident. I think you've got a rock there and you've got a bit of string and a pulley, you just put it on there and see if it works. So this one now, this is a little bit faster than it was, and so it goes back and forth. I think it was 250 odd. Yeah, Michelle knows. She was the one who had to walk the string back and forth. You can't pull it through because of the friction, and the machine doesn't go that fast. I think it was a 3-minute each turn. So it was nearly 3 days of Michelle walking backwards and forwards with a string. But these are these tensioning rocks that just move up and down a little bit, adjusting the tension coming in and out of that string. And slowly the colour coming out of the towel, the soil and the red and the grey start to be pulled up into the loop of string. And it ends up in this corner. It winds itself around really nicely in that corner there. So this whole, and it's really interesting seeing the people coming into it. And it's that, I've even seen, and looking and working out the process and thinking that it's just pulling it from under it or not, and sort of having to explain that it's actually little loops. But then some people actually come and look behind to see, like, oh, there's something else happening behind. And I've seen so many people do that and think that it's coming from something else. But it's just that it goes up to the ceiling, across to the middle, down, up, and then down across the bottom, and then comes out and off to that side. So it's simple. So so it's for me, it's really trying to, I suppose, give the audience an insight into, I suppose, Indigenous culture, but also a connection with the place they're at within the soil I'm using and the way the soil is being used there, and the way it's done respectfully and it's going back into culture. It's such a, I suppose, there's sort of an Indigenous way of being where it's always about the country, and what you take it sort of goes back into it. And I think there's a lot held within that. There's a lot held within the language that explains that. And within a country like here, where there's a lot greater respect for the materials and how they get used and how they become a part of culture. And the parallels to that of Aboriginal culture, where it is about, again, it's about that respect of land. But I suppose it'd be nice for Australia to have a little bit more, I suppose, insight into, and it's happening very, very slowly, but to be able to look more into those languages and see how individuals at each spot were using the country, what more about how the language relates, how the country is being used. I suppose it's a complex issue, but there's a lot held within that I think that's being overlooked that would be very useful for everyone sort of going forward into the future. So that's the end of the presentation, and I'm sorry if I'm gone a little bit over
No,
time there.
perfect timing. You kept on time. We love that at the Asia Society Japan. So thank you for your fascinating talk.
Well, thank you.
I know we'll have lots of questions, and I think we realize not only how much you persevered during the temperatures in Aichi Prefecture, but that you had your lovely sister assisting you and kind of sharing that experience with you. So
Yeah.
shout out to Michelle. Thank you for that.
Sharing's caring, apparently.
There you
Yeah.
go. There you go. So I'm going to take the license as the moderator to ask you two questions that I've been dying to ask you as I heard your talk. So you said thrilled with or fascinated by the essence of time and erosion and the natural materials, revealing them to sort of show and reflect a changing landscape. And what really kind of struck me is that, and at the same time, you're creating your own machinery, mechanics, and there's that perfectionist side of you that's trying to bring out that predictability and show people like how much we have to respect time and change and evolution. So how did you think about the machinery with the art always, or what was your creative process that mixed the two to kind of and the natural materials to create your message? That's my first question. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's a big question. It's because I've tried to analyze that, and each work is a little bit different. I'll see, I'll get a glimpse of part of a process. It's like the first work, one of the first works where it's eroding, the one I had in Yokohama, where it's eroding back through the surface. That started off as looking at that education system and blackboard, and so I painted a board black and wanting to show that build up, and it's almost like a palimpsest, this idea of building up, and when they rub it off again and build it up, and you get this sort of palimpsest, you can see some of the words underneath. And I wanted to have a method of eroding back through there, so I got like one of those little squirty bottles and was trying to do text with a squirty bottle. And then from that evolved to start anything about mechanics, but then you can't build up chalk by hand like that. So then it was developing a process of spraying on chalk, which is not something that you can see on YouTube. So it's developing all these things, and then that was like, oh, well, I've got a layer. I've got that, but it'd be nice if that was back to white, so I'm bringing the surface. So it's still painted black. Those are still painted black underneath. You don't get to see that. There's a slight variation. So and then developing the mechanics to do that. So yeah. And it always develops that way. It's not, I never have a mechanic and go, how can I apply that to the mechanic or an idea? There's sort of they all come in very small increments. That's the ideas, and that sort of builds and back and forth, and it moves in a different way.
Wow, that's really fascinating. So it's kind of really part of your whole creative method is the machinery sort of evolves with the artwork.
Yeah, and it's something I can't force. It's like I want to think of something around this. So I've got a lot of things that I've got like banked. You see something and you go, I don't know what I'm going to use that little bit for, or that idea, or that bit of research for. And then one day there's a coalescence, a cohesion of those two ideas that then gives you that, I suppose, it becomes that seed that starts to grow, and these other ideas attached to it, and it builds to something that's unknown until it gets up on the gallery.
So it's part of the whole natural process. It's an evolution itself, really. So
Yeah. I wish it was something I could put into AI now and go, how? But
That's the mystery of art, though. We like that.
yeah,
So,
and it cuts the fun as well.
Creative
As much
process.
as this is hard work, it's something I really enjoy because there's a lot of exploration in just the making and understanding of materials.
The second and last question before I open, I'm sure there's tons of questions from the audience, is you talk a lot about, language, lost language, and also the word buru being, kind of universal for lots of different parts of nature, soil, et cetera. So what was really interesting is that you deliberately used local materials for your Aichi triennial, the upper shed, right, to reveal that word. So you're using a word connected to the indigenous people in Australia, but with local materials in Japan. So is there some way you're trying to is it a universal truth? What are you aiming to do with using sort of an Australian ancient language using materials from your host country? Is there some thing
Yeah,
you're working for?
yeah, that's another really good question. It's just like, and I like that because it makes me think, and there's making the artwork because it doesn't become apparent until I live with it for a while. But I think there's a great parallel, I think, with that word that I'm sure other languages have a similarity in concept to. And again, for me to explore it as a person who speaks English and to try to explore a Japanese word that means the same, where I've got to then translate from one to the other, it becomes more of a feel, and that's what this work is about. That sort of, you go in there and it's not a didactic word where you look at it and you read it in a way, or read a didactic and get the message. It's something that is experiential, for coming in and seeing that. So there's that connection there. How I'll feel about it in 2 months' time might be a little bit different, but I think it develops. I think as you see it, it'll develop there for the viewer.
It evokes kind of
Hopefully.
a feeling with people when they look at it. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hopefully.
I'm excited because I'm going on the trip, so I will be able to see it firsthand. So
Yeah.
I'm
Excellent.
very excited to hear your description of it. Okay, I'll open it up into questions in the room before we go to the online participants.
Yes, thank you very much. And that's great presentation and great in preparation for us to visit in Aichi Triennale in 2 months' time. Well, my question is that I really want to know how you develop your career. Means that sometimes many artists start as an art student, sculpture or painting or something, drawing. Those and following the very common or usual things. But now you are in the place at theater, having your own historical or background, and the soil and the machines combined, making this such a unique installation. When and how you got such idea or encounter such ideas and create current style of your art? That's my question.
Okay. Not going to get out of this easy with the questions, which is, I see. I suppose I went to art school late in life. I suppose I started at university at 45, and it was something I went back to explore my Indigenous heritage, our Indigenous heritage of our family. And to learn a lot more. There was my sister went through this process, this learning down in Victoria in Australia, in Geelong, and for me it was almost those moments of alignment where my partner was working at the university, and she met the convener of this particular course, which is Contemporary Australian Indigenous Art. So I went there. Basically, I had a whole lot of different careers. There's sort of one with a telecommunication company, sort of doing programming and doing 3D modelling and making furniture with my other sister in Newcastle. So I've got a habit of working with my sisters. But I think it was from there. I had a whole lot of different, I was always making and building things. Even from a young child, I had a great desire to always corrupt electronic devices and make things in my bedroom as from 5 years old. My dad worked for a telecommunications company, so that's where that interest came from. But I think I never set out to be an artist. When I went through this course, they did arts, and it was Australian contemporary arts, but it was more about exploring my heritage, and a lot of that, the university course was about that, finding family history and working through that. So it was, I think, having the skill set I had coming into that, learning about family. I think bottom class of English at high school. I was really bad at English, so I found that storytelling verbally was really difficult. But then all of a sudden I found that these skill sets, and there was no limitations to what you could do at university for building. And I found with my skill sets a bit of electronics and a bit of building, and that all these things came together in a way that gave me, it opened things up. I mean, as soon as you can start to design and build and have an idea, it took a while to get to where I am, but it's something that that's where it came out. So these ideas, it's come from a huge huge skill set. It sounds a bit pretentious. A skill set in different areas, and the knowledge that I had learning at that time, and that continually learning as I go along. So it's just sort of this. It's this sort of, I don't know, they're now intertwined into each other. So they work together to produce these. So, yeah, hopefully that sort of give you an insight.
Yes. So Jun Kiyoshi, he's part of our arts committee, and he also went back. He's still an investment banker, but he studied art, so studied art history. So we have a lot of people that continue learning in their career. So it's exciting that you really came into this at 45, where you started really, going back to school and created a whole new journey. In art, right?
It was very scary because arts world is never known as like, I'm going to be an artist and I'm going to go out and get a job here and get highly paid. There's no structure to that. You end up, you make because it comes from here. There's a passion in it, and I think I got the bug, and I can't stop.
Well, we're very happy you have, so we can all enjoy it. So next question.
I actually went down to Nagoya to see his work at the Aichi Triennale. It was the only work. I spent all afternoon just admiring his work. And I didn't see another work. Her was angry with me because she said, "What about all the other work?" I said, "Well, for now, I'm just focused on Robert." And the dots started connecting. How you're an Australian version of the Minge movement, of reviving traditions, the Aboriginal traditions of art, into a contemporary art form. You're also a modern-day Milton Moon, who was the bridge between Australia and Japan, and he's the most well-known Australian potter who's passed on now. He's the uncle of Rosalind Pigott, another artist that shares the same gallery as Robert. And he would come to Japan and work with Hamada in Mashiko, and using Mashiko clays. And you're also a modern day version of a modern art version of Frank Lloyd Wright, of going to the location, taking the natural materials and creating something out of the natural materials. I would, if I was an art critic writing an article on your work, I would say Robert Andrew, the Earth version of Anish Kapoor. And at the end of the article, I would have one line that said, Anish Kapoor, the acrylic version of Robert Andrew. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Johnny.
I was just interested in one of the remarks you made about language or words merely just being a capsule, and they can't, I suppose, translate the full meaning, particularly of the Aboriginal meaning, the anglicised version. Just out of curiosity, why, with your works, do you yield that, or seek to yield for some of the works, that end result, as opposed to, the art might be called that, but it need not necessarily result in, that end word.
Yeah. I mean, that I battle with that because I'm using that form again, and there's a sort of a bit of a contradiction for me in then sort of putting that up there on display. But in a lot of works, it's never this crisp word. It's always something that appears, but it's sort of something that's being almost then taken away again by the work. So it's a really difficult thing because it's wanting to use that as it's sort of almost that releasing from that container in a way, if I can. So I really battle with that, and I'd like to not, but there's no other way to, I think, develop that connection for the viewer between what it is and where it should be. In a sense, I hopefully give that a perception that this is not. This is something that's where it's been fitted, and I'm trying to then remove that fitment and replace it in another area where it can move and have that freedom of movement that it doesn't have within that sort of rigidity of that English container. Yeah, it's a one I still, it's really difficult because it's something, this has been given to it, and you don't want to acknowledge it, but then there's this having to acknowledge to then convey, and then it's sort of that work through it myself in a sense.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll just go to online, see if do we have any questions, Sabako?
Sure. We have one question from Shoya Grigg, and his question is, do you see any connections between the Indigenous Aboriginal people of Australia and the Ainu of Japan up in Hokkaido?
That's I've only done or know a little bit about that group of people, but I think there's I went to Taiwan last year at the end of the year for a month, and lived in a little place called Shandong and worked with an artist there, and he was an Indigenous artist. So I see in and there's sort of other places. There's always, for me, there's a language difference, but there was that connection of what has come before, what has happened to, I suppose, culture. It's with theirs. It was completely different. There's similarities with there, but there's always seems to be, if there's another group of people coming to that, to within that culture, there's a loss of identity somewhere there. In Taiwan, they weren't allowed to use their own names. That was taken away from them, and the language, until relatively recently, was banned to be used. So that's part of identity, of people's identity, and I don't know enough about them to understand the dynamics there. But there's always similarities. I think there parallels within different groups, and it's without knowing a lot more, I'm a bit reluctant to sort of extend on that.
Given the nature of your work, which seems to me, you have to be meticulous in the setup, particularly when you come to a country like Japan, what are your nerves like? What trepidation do you have in terms of setting things up so that piece of string works and the droplets work? And if you are producing something that yields a anglicized word or some other word, that the technical element behind your work works. Like, how do you feel? Are you full of nerves and anxiety, or is it just just another project?
No, it's always nerves. I spent the whole time preparing for one particular, the string work. The string work is very temperamental. That's the one that I have to balance each side. I don't have that written down. I don't have that worked out beforehand. So and I don't have the soil worked out until I get here and I feel it and we play with it and get that. So, and even then it might not be exact. So you've got to adjust things. So the drip work, it's a simple mechanism in a sense, which is just like a big 3D, well, it's not 3D plotter, but XY axis, Cartesian axis mechanism. I've done lots of times. The electronics and the programming is something I know well. The water should be the same. There's things with heights and the water wanting to feed back through. So there's all these technical things. I come with all these different things. I come with probably twice as much as I need as backups, a plan B and plan C. But there's always the unknown, and that scares me. That creates great anxiety because it's down to the end, and you don't know what it's going to be like until it starts, and you don't have a lot of time. You don't have your workshop where you can go, oh, I need to machine this or make this. I can design things quickly, and mill things quickly to change things. But here it's like all sticky tape and a bit of plastic from a card or something like that to change it. So it's always, and because it's not just then it's up on the wall and it's static. It keeps moving. So there's a certain maintenance that has to come with it, and you've got to develop that plan as you go. I'm still developing the one for the string work. Yeah. So yes.
Well, wow. Well, thank you for that candor. We do have one more question online, and we'd like to try to get to that, and then we will close. So go ahead, Sawako.
Actually, we have two questions, so I'm going to combine
Okay.
the two. One question is there a temporal aspect of your work? And the other is, what are your thoughts about erosion of culture itself?
So a temporal aspect. What would that sort of...
I don't know. The question is just one sentence, so
Yeah.
I could ask.
Kind of temporary or temporal, set in, I guess, a period of time. I'll check that, but yep.
Yeah. I mean, that's a sort of a thing. It does... we were having a discussion yesterday about that or something similar. And it was, I think, it's an ephemeral work. It disappears at the end. It's only there for a certain amount of time. It doesn't exist beyond that. It gets dismantled, which I suppose it fits within in that. And a lot of the works they get painted over on the wall with a charcoal. I like that because they actually stay behind the wall. They paint over, but you know that they're in the walls of the institutions, and it's the marking of it. But they're works that they're stopped because of the limitation of time that's given for that particular work. These works can continue, and I don't know whether indefinitely, but the erosion works, I would like to see that to continue beyond that, to see what comes of it. And I don't have that privilege yet to leave a work for a year or 2 years. But still, everything in that regard is something that only the time where all exists within this sort of temporal space, if that's the way of looking at it. So I don't know if that answers or it gives insight to that question. Hopefully it does.
The other question is, what are your thoughts around erosion of culture itself?
Yeah, I I mean, there's part of what my work looks at is a certain erosion, I suppose, of that culture, and hopefully is that sort of re-establish of the importance of culture through what it's doing as well. But erosion of culture, it's a big one. I think like with the Indigenous culture, with colonization, there's definitely a lot has been taken from the identity of Indigenous people in different areas, in different amounts for different groups. And so some people have totally lost their language. When you lose your language, you lose that connection. Well, you don't. You always have that connection to country, but you lose that language to talk about that connection to country, and that's a great part of identity. So within that regard, I think as a generalisation, I think an Indigenous culture, going back to that, it has had that taken away from it, but then it's used what it's got around the tools that it has as a total culture to then move forward and keep moving as a culture. It hasn't stopped. It hasn't remained static with all those bits that have been removed. Those bits are starting to be added to it. Culture in general, I don't know. That's a big question, and I think there's always a perceivable erosion in different ways.